Welcome into a special edition of the Tennessee Pro Football Podcast. Blaine Kellar, the Titan insider, Terry McCormick, and Mark Rogers joining you. The Tennessee Titans named their new head coach and former San Francisco 49ers defensive coordinator and New York Jets head coach Robert Saleh. He replaces interim coach Mike McCoy, and before him, Brian Callahan, who went 3-14 in consecutive seasons in Tennessee. Terry, your immediate reaction to Robert Saleh being named the head coach of the Tennessee Titans, what is it?
Well, I think it's a bit of an upset because from all indications I had been getting, and I think a lot of people had been getting, Matt Nagy looked like the front runner given his previous relationship with Mike Borgonzi and the fact that the Titans would probably want someone who can develop Cam Ward. Now, Robert Saleh does check the box of leader of men, which is something I think that the Titans have been wanting and probably miss with the departure of Mike Vrabel a couple of years ago, and now they're trying to get that back. But it's very interesting because we'll see what Robert Saleh has learned from his time with the Jets, that in terms of what he would do differently. And also we'll have to see who his offensive coordinator is going to be that's going to be tasked with mentoring and developing Cam Ward.
Titans completed interviews with more than 16 candidates, it was announced, throughout their process. Matt Nagy being one of those. He was one of two finalists, the Kansas City offensive coordinator. The rest of that list: Steve Spagnuolo, the defensive coordinator for Kansas City; Vance Joseph, the Denver Broncos defensive coordinator; Lou Anarumo, who was the Colts DC, also including former Browns head coach Kevin Stefanski; Titans interim coach Mike McCoy; former Dallas Cowboys coach Jason Garrett; Brian Daboll, the New York Giants head coach until this year; Jonathan Gannon, also a fired head coach from the Arizona Cardinals. Continuing that list on to Jeff Hafley, who ended up in Miami, formerly the Green Bay defensive coordinator; Mike McCarthy, another former Cowboys coach; Mike McDaniel, who's the name to watch in the offensive coordinator race for the Titans; Jesse Minter, the defensive coordinator for the Chargers; Raheem Morris, who was the Falcons head coach last year; and Arthur Smith, previously offensive coordinator for the Pittsburgh Steelers, as well as the Tennessee Titans. There was some interest in John Harbaugh and maybe a little bit of attraction to former Buffalo Bills coach Sean McDermott, who was relieved of his duties this week. We're going to get into all of that on the other side of this break. But first, let me tell you, our show is presented by the Mint Gaming Hall, home of the largest sportsbook in Kentucky in Circus Sports, home of an 80-foot sportsbook screen and stadium-style seating, where you can catch the rest of the Titans coaching search, which will extend to coordinators and assistant coaches on the staff, and catch the rest of the NFL playoffs, the AFC and NFC championships, as well as the Super Bowl. Thank you to Circus Sports and the Mint for sponsoring our show. You're watching the Tennessee Pro Football Podcast on Main Street Media Television.
The winning just got closer. All new sportsbook, the latest gaming machines, live horse racing, and more. The Mint Gaming Hall, Kentucky Downs.
Winning just got closer.
He shoots, and he scores!
When I think of Delta Dental now, it's really their core values. It's the volunteerism, it's the giving back.
Delta Dental gives us 10,000 toothbrushes. So twice a year, we have these children that are going home with food that may not have weekend food, and they're also getting a toothbrush.
The best partners are the ones that truly do impact the community together, and I don't think there's a better example of that than our partnership with Delta Dental.
This holiday season, the largest lantern festival in the country returns to Nashville Zoo. Experience more than 1,000 all-new handcrafted lanterns, towering creatures, magical worlds, and a North Pole village. At the center of it all, the Smashville Ice Rink. Welcome back to Zoolumination at Nashville Zoo. Bigger, brighter, and better than ever.
Robert Saleh went 20-36 as a head coach of the New York Jets. He will now get his second try as head coach in the NFL, with the Tennessee Titans being named the head coach of the Titans late last night, that being Monday night. Terry, a lot of the talk is that head coaches typically get two tries at being a head coach after you fail the first time. The second time is the most important. If you fail, then you don't really get a second chance. Well, why do you think that Robert Saleh thought this would be an attractive position to try again as a head coach?
Well, I think, first of all, it's one of 32. It's one of 10 openings. There's certainly some that were more attractive. Obviously, Buffalo just coming open, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, the history and, of the New York Giants lured, and a lot of money lured John Harbaugh there. The Atlanta Falcons wound up with Kevin Stefanski. I said from the jump that this Titans job was a middle of the pack type of job, and it kind of fell a notch or two when the Ravens, Steelers, and Bills jobs opened up. So, Robert Saleh was probably one of the 5 or 6 best candidates that's on the market to be a head coach, and the Titans wound up with him. And so from that perspective, I think it turns out okay. To me, the big challenge for Robert Saleh has got to be, Blaine, he's got to figure out what he's going to do on offense. In his 3 full seasons with the New York Jets, they were bottom 5 in points scored each of those 3 seasons. Now, some of that you can lay at the feet of Zach Wilson, who failed to develop as the number 2 overall pick. But you're in the same situation with Cam Ward. You've got a number 1 overall pick, a guy who's highly regarded when drafted, and now it's up to you to find somebody who can develop him better than Mike LaFleur and Nathaniel Hackett could Zach Wilson.
LaFleur, a name that has been floated out because of his time with Saleh with the Jets. Obviously that connection there could make him an attractive OC. Obviously having success with the Rams right now. A few other names that have been floated out early in this process. Brian Daboll, who we mentioned earlier, interviewed for the head coaching job, was the Giants head coach last year, previously worked with Josh Allen in Buffalo, so has experience with offensive success. Also, Mike McDaniel, another head coaching candidate who has taken a trip across the country, it seems, for OC and head coaching jobs. He's going to have his pick of the litter with regards to what position he wants next. But him and Saleh have ties dating back to San Francisco.
Yes, they are close friends. McDaniel and Saleh are very close friends. Now, the question is, how far does that go? Because, like you said, McDaniel is going to have other opportunities. Is his friendship with Robert Saleh, does that mean more than, say, the opportunity to coach Lamar Jackson or Baker Mayfield? Probably not, because those guys are established quarterbacks that are proven winners that you can go pretty deep into the playoffs with if the right things develop. So to me, Mike McDaniel would be the home run hire here in Tennessee. It's a matter of how attractive is the Titans and how close is that friendship with Robert Saleh versus the other opportunities that Mike McDaniel surely is going to have, including some that could even be a head coach. And the same thing with Brian Daboll, who is getting mentions in Buffalo to be the replacement for Sean McDermott. Daboll, of course, kind of made his name there in developing Josh Allen before he took the job as the New York Giants head coach. So a reunion with Josh Allen is not out of the question there. Otherwise, you're looking at other guys that were brought into this process as possible offensive coordinators, I think, even though they were brought in as head coach candidates. And that would be, like I said, Daboll, McDaniel, Arthur Smith would be on that list. The Cliff Kingsbury interview never really materialized, so I don't know if he would be on the radar, but it's going to be interesting to see where Robert Saleh goes with this OC hire.
I think the other side of it on the coordinators is pretty interesting too. How much of a change is in responsibility maybe is that defensive coordinator going to have with the defensive mind that Robert Saleh has and the implication that he would probably call defensive plays? How does that change the hiring of a defensive coordinator throughout the process, you think?
Well, that's a good point. If Saleh is going to call the plays on defense, then he's going to need a defensive coordinator who can make out a game plan each week, but then not get to execute it and have to turn it over to someone else on game day, much like Nick Holtz did here the last couple of years on offense. So there will be some restrictions. It'll be interesting to see. I don't think Denard Wilson would be retained, but I think it's maybe worth at least an interview to allow him to keep his job. There will be some other defensive coordinator candidates that will pop up out there, probably guys who have stronger ties to Robert Saleh. But it'll be interesting to see how that goes as well, and what type of role exactly that defensive coordinator plays if Robert Saleh is in fact going to run the defense.
Robert Saleh said the Titans were his number one option, and you and I joked before the show, any coach that's going to be hired to a team this year would probably say that, because why wouldn't they say that certain thing that the team I'm hired to is where I want to be? But I wanted to bring up the opposite side of that coin with you, Terry. Where did the Titans rank Robert Saleh, you think, in their coaching search and in the rankings that they had of available candidates?
I think he was always in the top 4 or 5. I think, obviously John Harbaugh would have been the top of everyone's list. McDermott's kind of a wild card in this. It hasn't come out yet whether or not the Titans made inquiries and were willing to pause the process. Obviously, they weren't willing to either they weren't willing to pause the process to take a look at McDermott for risk of losing Saleh, or McDermott told them thanks but no thanks as part of this process. So to me, those two are far and away the best candidates. Then most people probably had Kevin Stefanski, given that he's a 2-time coach of the year, even though he had his struggles at times with the Bears. The Titans obviously had Matt Nagy ranked really high and Jeff Hafley, but I think Robert Saleh was always there in the mix. And I think the reason for that, the evidence of that was he was scheduled for a Zoom call, which, is not, the best way to get to know somebody. It's, just kind of a formality really, but they canceled the Zoom call after the 49ers were eliminated from the playoffs on Sunday and immediately flew Robert Saleh in for a Monday interview, which apparently he nailed well enough to get the job. So to me, they always thought a lot of Robert Saleh, thinking enough of him to bring him in for an in-person visit. And then, of course, the other guy in the mix who reportedly now withdrew his name from consideration for an opportunity maybe to coach the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that's Mike McCarthy, who personally I thought would have been the best fit here, given that he is the coach with the longest tenure that has had the most success that was available on the market, especially once John Harbaugh was gone.
Especially with those other 3 hires handling out the way that they did. Kevin Stefanski supposedly to have an interview with Tennessee, then taking the job in Atlanta. The same thing happening with Jeff Hafley taking the job in Miami. Amy Adams-Strunk in the front office supposed to fly out to see John Harbaugh, only for him to take the New York Giants job. How much do you think that played an impact with how quickly they worked with Robert Saleh, especially with reports coming out that had he not accepted the job there with Tennessee, he was going to be on a plane to Arizona with the Cardinals?
Yeah, I think that probably had something to do with it, because 3 times they were left in the on-deck circle as the final out was made and never got a chance to get up to the plate with any of those previous 3 guys. Now, granted, they did have first interviews with Stefanski and Hafley, but did not get a face-to-face with Harbaugh. So to me, yeah, I think that probably played a little bit of a role in the situation, because it's one of those deals where you better get what you got now. Otherwise, if you lose out on Saleh, then it's Matt Nagy or nothing.
Would you like to see a pursuit of Sean McDermott at least a little bit more, especially if the fallback was Matt Nagy?
Yeah, I would like to have seen. Sometimes you got to go all in. And I think McDermott is a guy that would have been worth going all in for. Now, that said, I get that if they were impressed by Saleh, and obviously they were, that they felt like this was the road to go down. like I said, the only other option would be if McDermott had no interest in the Titans job, because he's a guy who's been used to winning. And would he want to take on a rebuild in his second go around? My guess is he would prefer not to, but he would rather go find a job like the Steelers or the Ravens where there's a better chance to win right away.
Talk a little bit about the weighing that Tennessee's front office had to do a little bit here with the hiring of a retread coach like Matt Nagy or Robert Saleh, who were both finalists for this job, or going after a new hire, a guy who hadn't been a head coach before. What are the checks and balances that come with that?
Well, when you go after a guy who's done it before, he at least has the experience and the knowledge of what to do when certain situations arise, even if he didn't handle it well in his first go around. I think you learn and grow, and you learn not only what to do, but what not to do. And I think that some guys can be better in their second stint because they do learn what not to do as well as what to do as situations crop up and arise. As whether it's dealing with injuries, whether it's dealing with position battles, whether it's dealing with just the off-field distractions that can come with being a head coach. There's so much more to being a head coach than being a coordinator that it is very taxing, it is very strenuous, and it is part of the day-to-day grind. And I think that that's part of what kind of usurped Brian Callahan, is that I don't think he was ready for the overwhelming responsibilities that come with a head coach, and he was also trying to call the plays. So to me, this go around, it shows me that the Titans were more interested in experience, in somebody who had been there, done that, even if the been there, done that wasn't all that successful, than somebody who was learning on the job.
Much was made from Matt Nagy's kind of take on this throughout the process as he was kind of being campaigned as a head coaching candidate. He talked a lot about what he would have changed that first time around. There was that long report about all the mistakes that he made as the Bears coach and how he would correct them a second time around. I'd be interested to know what Robert Saleh's corrections would be now in a second go around as a head coach. A lot of people say, well, there's a lot on his plate as is because of those extenuating circumstances. Being in New York, having the quarterback he had in Zach Wilson, and then a little bit of Aaron Rodgers. But I'm certain that there are a lot of things that he can correct this go around being in Tennessee. What do you think some of those things are?
Yeah, well, I think he's got to find a way to have a better offense. I think that is one of the most important things. And, being with the Jets, he certainly knows about dysfunction and how, the instability at the top of the organization can affect things. So maybe he's better equipped to deal with the dysfunction that permeates the Titans at the top, having gone through what he went through in New York. Now, that said, certainly Saleh needs to come in here and make a strong impression on the team and within the organization as he starts to build his coaching staff and build out the roster and work hand in hand with Mike Borgonzi to get that done. So to me, the Robert Saleh hire, it's a turning of the page. It's going back to leader of men, discipline, those sorts of things. Now, that's all well and good. That's great. The Titans need a lot of that. But the bottom line is, can you win some games? You got to find some players who can upgrade the roster. You got to find some coaches who can coach those players up, specifically on offense where Saleh is not familiar. And then you've got to also, just navigate the day-to-day dysfunction that comes with being with the Titans. And I think that's something that probably steered some candidates clear of here.
Yeah, could you expand on that a little bit more? Do you think, and I think there were some reports that came out near the tail end of this search that maybe it wasn't a top option for some candidates that went elsewhere because of all the hirings and firings that have gone on here recently?
Sure. I mean, that's exactly it. The upheaval that has been the Titans for the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, it's well documented. It goes from John Robinson to Mike Vrabel to Rand Carthon to Brian Callahan to Mike McCoy. And really, if you want to throw it in there, how else are you looking at Chad Brinker's shift as anything other than, hey, he's no longer in charge. Borgonzi is running the show on the football side now. So even more, even though that most fans probably would like a more normal structure that the Titans have gone back to with the general manager calling the shots in the front office, it's still, a matter of trying to sort out who does what, who's where, and and what Chad Brinker's role was and now is. So there are all of those things that are just kind of moving simultaneously throughout the organization. And if you're sitting here and you're wondering, why how much your job security is on the line or how many years you have to get this done, to get this thing rebuilt and turned around, that's going to make a lot of coaching candidates kind of scared off. And for the same reason, let me put it to you this way. For the same reason that the Jets dysfunction is something Robert Saleh can point to and say, I never really had a great chance there. You can bet that Brian Callahan in his OC interviews that he's had with Tampa Bay and the Chargers, he's saying the same thing about the Titans. I never really had a chance because of the chaos and confusion.
This is the situation that Robert Saleh now enters as the new Titans head coach. His best season with the Jets, twice he finished 7-10. He will try to build upon that as Tennessee's newest coach. We're going to talk about the impact that this has on Cam Ward, the number 1 quarterback from last season, as well as the number 4 overall pick that the Titans hold in this year's draft. On the other side of this break, you're watching the Tennessee Pro Football Podcast on Main Street Media Television.
The winning just got closer. All new Sportsbook, the latest gaming machines, live horse racing, and more. The Mid Gaming Hall, Kentucky Downs.
Winning just got closer.
He shoots, and he scores!
What I think of Delta Dental now, it's really their core values. It's the volunteerism, it's the giving back.
Delta Dental gives us 10,000 toothbrushes. So twice a year, we have these children that are going home with food that may not have weekend food, and they're also getting a toothbrush.
The best partners are the ones that truly do impact the community together, and I don't think there's a better example of that than our partnership with Delta Dental.
Thank you to Spring Hill Suites, Iron Steakhouse, and a world-class horse racing track. That's the first time all year I've messed that up. The Mint Gaming Hall for being our sponsor throughout this season, all the way up until the Titans coaching search, which is now concluded. If you'd like to continue to sponsor our show, talking to you, the Mint, or anyone else out there, be sure to check us out at Main Street Nashville. Reach out to our sales folks. They'd be glad to sponsor our drive to the draft. And speaking of the draft, the Titans hold the number 4 overall selection in the 2026 NFL draft. Hiring a defensive coach, Terry, does that lean one way or the other toward a wide receiver or an edge selection at number 4?
I got to think that this might mean edge rusher becomes a major priority, because when you look at Robert Saleh's defenses that he had in San Francisco and with the Jets, they really, were strong on that side of the football. And Robert Saleh, got the most out of his teams on the defensive side of the ball. So if there is a solid edge rusher, whether it be David Bailey, whether it be Arvell Reese, whether it be Reuben Bain, any of those guys, I think are going to be really seriously vetted by this Titans scouting staff and Robert Saleh and his staff that he puts together. And I got to think that that's going to be a situation that they're going to look at pretty strongly as they go into this draft. Now, that's not to say that if, they are blown away by a wide receiver talent, or if they are, if they are in love with, a player at another position, that it couldn't happen, because there are needs all over the place on this roster that they could do whatever they want with number 4 and probably find a position of need. So to me, everything is on the board, but I would start to lean defense and impact players there at the edge position.
Yeah, I have two thoughts on this. I think first off, the Titans are kind of pigeonholed either way you look at it. If you draft the receiver, you're going to see the lack of edge rusher that they still have. And the same thing's going to happen if they draft an edge rusher. There's not going to be that top receiver unless they can find a diamond in the rough in the later rounds that could turn into a top option for Cam Ward, who we'll get on to in a second. I looked at the 4 drafts that Robert Saleh had as part of the New York Jets. 2 offense, 2 defense selections in the first round. Zach Wilson being one of them, did not turn out very well. In 2022, they had the number 4 selection and selected Sauce Gardner, quarterback there. So they went corner, they went quarterback, edge rusher and Will McDonald. I believe that was in the middle selections of the first round. And then Olu Fashanu, an offensive lineman, was in Saleh's last draft. So 2 and 2 there. So it could go either way, but I think I'm in agreement there. I think the Titans could more benefit from someone like a Jordan Tyson or a Carmel Tate at receiver, and then maybe spend some of that money in free agency on an edge rusher. The wide receiver pool in free agency isn't all that deep, is kind of my thinking on it. Where do you kind of stand on that regard?
Well, I kind of go the other way because when you're looking for elite talent and at the edge position, you almost have to draft an impact edge rusher in the first round. We saw what the Titans did last year with Femi Oladejo, who was a project. They took him in the second round. He was injured pretty early on, didn't get to do a whole lot. They're still hoping that he'll come around, but it's far easier to find a solid receiver in round 2 or 3 than it is to find a solid edge rusher.
Yeah, we'll close out with this thought, Terry. Zach Wilson was Robert Saleh's quarterback in the first round of his first draft. Obviously, Wilson did not pan out to Saleh's liking, to anyone in the NFL's liking, obviously, declared as a bust quarterback. But does that give you any form of concern, knowing that Robert Saleh's top selection at quarterback in the start of his Jet tenure didn't pan out, and now they're kind of bringing on another young quarterback for Saleh to kind of have there with him?
A little bit, but I think it's more of the offensive coordinator's concern. Even though Saleh is going to be the one, the buck's going to stop with him because he's the head coach. It's going to be more the offensive coordinator who's going to be working with Cam Ward on a day-to-day, play-to-play basis. And in that regard, I think it's fine. Where I think that you have to have a little concern if things are rocky early on, when a new coach comes in. He gave Zach Wilson 2 full years because he drafted Zach Wilson. Then they decided to go out and get Aaron Rodgers and make Zach Wilson the backup. It blew up in their face when Rodgers got hurt 4 snaps into the 2023 season, and they were back with Wilson again. So it's interesting from that perspective in that he gave up on his own guy in 2 years. Cam Ward is not his own guy. Cam Ward is Mike Morganzi's guy, but he was Brian Callahan's guy. So to me, Cam Ward is going to be kind of on the clock a little bit to show progress for this new coach who did not draft him, because it may come down to, well, if he's not progressing, I need to make a move. Because you remember when Dave Canales took the job in Carolina, he quickly yanked Bryce Young from the starting lineup, at least for a short time, because he didn't feel like he was ready to handle the load of being a starting quarterback. Now, I think Cam Ward is more advanced than Bryce Young was at that stage. But if I'm Cam Ward, I got to come in. I got to hit the ground running. I got to learn this new offense, and I got to get up to speed very quickly to impress my new coaches.
Reading the tea leaves here, but hiring a defensive coach also speaks all the more to what you're talking about there, rather than an offensive mind that could build up a quarterback similarly to what Brian Callahan was listed to do a few years ago. So the clock could be ticking for Cam Ward. The clock is now ticking for Robert Saleh, who is the Titans' new head coach. Be sure to catch all of our coverage on the fallout of that and the hiring of his staff on TitanInsider.com and Main Street Nashville. Stay tuned, hopefully, to our drive to the draft, which will be coming up with the Senior Bowl, with the NFL Combine, and of course, the NFL Draft. Thanks for watching the Tennessee Pro Football Podcast on Main Street Media Television.